Have you ever tried making a shaker card before? Don't worry, they're a lot easier than they look, and I'll show you how I made this card in today's stylish card making techniques with Jenny, featuring a full background shaker with lots and lots of satin white sequins from Altenew, so stay tuned. Hi guys, it's Jenny. Welcome back to another episode. Today I'm going to make a background shaker card and it features this Calming Reflections cover die from Altenew. I'm going to die cut this twice from Nina Solar White 80-pound cardstock. It's a little bigger than 4 1/4 by 5.5 inches, and so I'm having to flip it around on my cardstock here just to make sure I cut it. I do save the scraps for another card later on. It cuts like a dream, as you can see. These pieces just pop out super easy, and you get this really fun sort of pebble look with not many sharp edges, just that border around the outside. As I said, I'm going to die cut it twice, and if you remember from one of my earlier videos, I did this with the string panel die. I'm going to flip it around 180 degrees and overlay it on top of the other one, and you'll see it gives this almost three-dimensional look. I'm going to add to that dimension by putting a thin strip of foam tape all around the outside border. Now this foam tape is super thin. You can also use your Altenew foam tape and just cut it really thin as well. I do recommend using scissors that are made for cutting sticky tape so that they don't get stuck onto it when you're doing your cutting. I'm using these ones here. They're great for cutting sticky foam tape and other types of glue. And I'm just going to put this all around the outside edge. There's a couple of areas where it's a little too thin to put that foam tape, and that's okay. I can just snip it. And then I added a few pieces in the middle, just where it's a little bit thicker, just to make sure it doesn't sag in the center when I create my card. I'm just going to peel off that backing and then flip that second piece around 180 degrees and then place one on top of the other so that they perfectly adhere and there's no overlapping at the edges. And that way I get this really fun sort of 3 or 4 millimeter dimension in between the two panels, and it gives this great look. Really love doing this with cover dies. And I'll give you a quick side view. You can see there's already a little bit of dimension going on there. It just adds a little bit more than just sticking them one on top of the other, I find. Now this is going to form the background panel window. So we're going to see all those sequins shaking around through those little holes. So I'm going to adhere onto the back of my double panel a panel of clear acetate. This is going to be my window. I've added some liquid glue all around that outside and just a few dabs here and there. You want to be careful not to put it on too thick, because if you push it down to adhere it, it will smush out, and you don't want to get any glue going onto that acetate where it can be seen from the front. It's a nightmare to try and clear off. I just remove that backing paper and you can see I've got this perfect window effect. Now I'm going to create my shaker well with some more of that thin foam tape, and I'm going to double it up because I'm using satin white sequins from Altenew. They're a little dimensional and I want to make sure they don't get stuck and they're easily able to shake around. So I'm going to double up this thin foam tape. It's extra thin, so I need a little bit more dimension. With Altenew's foam tape, it's also a little thinner, so I would recommend doubling that up as well if you're using that. And then I'm going to adhere it all the way around the outside edge. This time I have to be really careful that we do not leave any gaps, because those sequins will escape through those gaps. So you'll see I'll trim off this edge, and then when I come in with my second layer, I got to butt up that edge right up against the already adhered piece of foam tape, and that way those sequins can't escape. Because we created a double panel, that's perfect border. You won't see that foam tape peeping through from the front. I've grabbed my sequins and I love using these. You might have noticed them on several cards. So I'm actually running really low. I had about 1/4 of a tube left and it was just enough to tip into my shaker card here. For my backer, I'm going to add a panel of navy cardstock over the top. I'm just going to push it down onto that foam tape. I've trimmed it to just under 4¼ by 5½, so I can adhere it perfectly and I don't have to trim around the outside. And that gives me my shaker. I love playing with these. I make them quite a lot, and I always get comments like, oh, shakers are too hard or they're too complicated, and they really, really aren't. You just have to take your time with that foam tape. To embellish my shaker, I'm going to add a couple more die cuts. The first one I'm using is the Altenew Leafy Wreath. This is a really delicate wreath die cut. I'm going to die cut it from gold Mirror Cardstock from Altenew, and then just use my handy Altenew tweezers just to pop it out. It's really delicate, so I highly recommend going slowly when you're pulling it out, so be careful not to rip it. And then I'm going to make it dimensional, and rather than die cutting it again several more times and layering them up with glue, which you could do, I'm going to grab some more thin strips of foam tape and double those up on the back on most of the leaves, just to avoid any sagging again. I'm then going to flip it over and pop it directly onto the center of my shaker panel. As I say, it's quite delicate. You have to be careful not to pull it and stretch it. So just let it naturally fall onto that panel. It will create that circular wreath look. And if you were really clever, you could actually make a double shaker. And I did think about that. You could trim down a piece of acetate so it fitted onto the back of that wreath and make another shaker on top if you wanted to go super complex. For my focal image, I'm using Engraved Flowers, which is a gorgeous stamp set, one of my favorites, and I'm going to heat emboss it onto some vellum. So I'm going to lay down this large floral and then treat my vellum, which I've trimmed down to fit in my mini Misty, with a powder bag. That just stops embossing powder sticking where I don't want it. It removes all that static cling and any greasy fingerprints that you may not see but are there. And then I'm going to grab my Altenew embossing ink, ink up the stamp, and using my mini Misty, stamp it down onto that vellum. I'm going to heat emboss it in pure white crisp embossing powder. This is a really nice bright white embossing powder. It sticks really well, melts really nice and smooth. I am heating my heat gun up off screen, so I've been heating it up for maybe just under a minute, so it's nice and hot, and then that way when I bring it to the vellum I don't have to use it for too long. It stops that vellum warping, which can sometimes be a bit of an issue when you're using vellum. Luckily this vellum is nice and thick, so it's not very warpable. And then I'm going to die cut it out with the coordinating dies. You'll see I'm using my Satin masking tape to adhere all of my dies in this episode, and it's my favorite masking tape. It's so good, it tears so easily and just runs through die cutting machines like a dream. Absolutely great. And that gives me a gorgeous, delicate, floral engraved flower for my feature image. For the sentiment, that's from the same stamp set. I'm going to stamp that down onto some of that navy cardstock again, being sure to treat it with my powder bag. I'm going to use my embossing ink and heat emboss it with pure white embossing powder one more time. It says, "Fabulous, yes you are!" exclamation point. And I thought that would be awesome to go with the navy gold white look. Very classy and elegant, but with a little bit of fun in that sentiment. And this font is awesome, don't you think? I really like this font. It's a little bit unusual. Now, the perennial problem of how to adhere vellum onto things without any adhesive showing through. My trick is to use the sentiment in this case. So I've added 2 foam squares onto the back of my sentiment, put it off to an angle onto the edge of my flower, and then flipped it over and added 2 more. So I've got a double layer there with the flower sandwiched between, and then on that area that's quite thick with embossing powder, I've added another small foam square up in the top, and that will keep it nice and secure without any adhesive showing through at all. And then I can just adhere it onto a top folding note card, and that finishes my card. I hope you've enjoyed. If you did, give us a thumbs up and subscribe. Do leave a comment, and I'll look forward to seeing you again soon. Bye.
Hello crafters, Jen here. For more tips, techniques, tutorials, and to discover which paper crafting products are right for you, subscribe to Altenew's YouTube channel. Make sure to hit the notification bell so you don't miss any videos. Thanks for watching.